Yeah, because I mean,
Let them come by and
where I've lived all these years has no maintenance at all.
I do that in my little house. Guy comes every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get somebody, I think.
And it's just like, it just Venmo him every 2
Yeah.
weeks.
Might as well. I'm Venmoing everybody else. I was walking around. How much do you? Good morning. Welcome to Metron. Most of you probably met Laverne. This is Gloria's sister from Phoenix. Phoenix? Phoenix is beautiful. So we're glad to have you. Happy Mother's Day. I think everybody took their mama out this morning. So, but I'm glad you're here. Those of you who are logged on, we got plenty of seats for you. So get in the car and drive on over. But happy Mother's Day to all the mothers and grandmothers and stepmothers, and I posted a thing last night. I just thanked everybody. I thanked my mother, the mothers of my children, and yet you're here today. Look at God. It's a sign and a wonder. Spirit of God, we're aware of your presence. We're always conscious of God. God is real. God is here. God is present. God is with us. Emmanuel is with us. Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. Something happens when there is a manifestation of us. Two or more gathered together in your name, and there you are. We thank you for the synergy that's on this group today, and believe that today is a day unlike any other day. And for whatever anyone may be feeling emotionally today because of the holiday, I just speak grace and peace to everyone. And we thank God for the women who were instrumental in bringing us into the world, and command a blessing on them or on their memory. We thank you for it in your name. Amen. Please remain standing. Let's pray together. Our Father who art in heaven, presence of divine love and light that lives within us and within all of life, hallowed be thy name. We holy. Thy kingdom come. We embrace the healing essence that is the kingdom of heaven within us. Thy will be done. We accept our greatest good as we align with our divine nature, on earth as it is in heaven, knowing that the affairs of our lives reflect our evolving consciousness. Give us this day our daily bread. Each day we receive great blessings from within and throughout all the activities of our lives. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We accept the divine nature of all things and all people, including ourselves, as we move away from judgment and toward greater awareness of divine presence. And lead us not into temptation. We shall be vigilant in expressing and experiencing the oneness with all life. But deliver us from evil as we are learning to live without fault-finding and suffering. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. For we accept the consciousness of divine perfection with all its power and glory, right here, right now, and forever. Amen. And so it is. Tell the person next to you, you've always been like a mother to me. And then, and then you may be seated. We were talking about it last night. I remember when I was growing up, my dad on Saturdays before Mother's Day always went to the florist, and if your mother was alive, we always had a red boutonniere, or got my mom a corsage, and if she had gone to the other side, you got a white one. And we also used to, Eddie, I don't know if you did this at your church, but we always honored the oldest mother, the youngest mother, and the mother of the most children. But times are so different now. Like women who are older now don't want to. They're like, I don't want to admit I'm the oldest. You know what I mean? It's like, and the youngest mother, sometimes that's not always a happy occurrence. You know, they're like, let's move on. So.
The last time I did that, I was leading service at Baptist church, the youngest mother that morning was 83, and I knew that church wasn't going to be there much longer. Seriously, 83, the youngest mother.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, anyway, and I took earlier in the week. I took my mom, got her a manicure, pedicure, and they do this hot rock thing that she loved, and so that was great. And then Ken got her a big cookie last night. It Happy Mother's Day, and we got a couple of hydrangea bushes we're going to put out. I don't think we can do it today, but and so we had dinner with her last night, and then we'll go do a late lunch with her today. So, and she's doing well. I've been in the house a little over 2 months, and it's all good. Come in. And hello. One thing that was cool, I didn't share this last week. I talked about it on 11/11, but it's kind of a sort of a neat thing about synchronicity that happened. I don't call it my mother's house anymore. It's my house where my mother's living, which she's fine with. I've done so many changes on it that it's, come on in. It sort of is. But little by little, I've lived all these years in a 800 square foot loft downtown where there's I don't have a yard. There's no maintenance. The utilities are part of the HOA payment, and so it's like there's nothing to deal with. Well, this house that I now have, it's something all the time. And one thing is the house. My parents bought it in 2013, and it's a 50-year-old house, beautiful neighborhood. Back in the day, some of you in the Atlanta area, Smoke Rise, back in the 70s, that was like, that was Atlanta's Riviera. It's not so much now, but it's still nice older neighborhoods. And when my dad moved in, I know he got everything up to speed, but the last few years of his life, he wasn't able to do that. So the house is on septic, and I don't know anything about septic tanks. I've never been on them before. So, and I don't even know how often you're supposed to maintain them, but I'm sure he did. The last years of his life, I'm sure he didn't do that. So it kept sort of bugging me, like I need to check into that. And all that 1 week, you keep hearing something mentioned, and you think, all right, that's the second. Well, at the meditation weekend, I asked if anybody, come on in. Which, by the way, congratulations to Wellington. His daughter Nina just graduated with honors. So, I see you, the sneakers matching your yellow jacket. I see you. When he sent me pictures of Nina graduating, I thought, I feel like I just married you in memory, a few years ago. But at times, just moving on. Anyway, now here's somebody who just came straight from the club. I wasn't going to say it this time, but Chandra just said it, so you walked in. Y'all already saw each other in the ladies' restroom about an hour ago. You going to church this morning? So anyway, I asked if anybody had good news they wanted to share. We're out there on the beach, and BJ, he and Joe just bought a new house. It was not disclosed to them that the house was on septic, so I won't go into all his story. It turned out to be a blessing, but they had to go through a little drama first. So, of course, when he brought it up, everybody starts telling their septic tank horror stories. I'm like, all right, we're gonna, y'all. This is a meditation weekend. I said, however, this is the third time this week I've heard this, so it's like I'm definitely on it. So as soon as I got back, I don't know how you do things. if I don't walk in the Spirit, I don't bat 1,000. So there's been several people I've had to look for since I've been back in the house, painters and tile guys and plumbers and I mean, I do a little bit of research and I look at, what they're going to charge, but basically I have to go with, the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord. I have to scroll through until I can't explain it, but there'll be this one that I'm like, that's it, that's the one. And I don't know how to tell you, but I've learned if I don't obey that, it doesn't go well. And so I started with Googling septic maintenance, Tucker, Stone Mountain area. Well, you'd be amazed how many. I mean, there's a lot to choose from. And then when you scroll out to the metro area, good Lord, people must have a lot of septic tanks because there's like zillions of people to choose from. So I'm scrolling, and this one, I can't explain why. There was nothing fancy about, there was nothing catchy about their name, nothing fancy. I was just like, man, that's the one. So I guess it was Monday or Tuesday. It must have been Tuesday. They came over. So the guy got there, and so I took a picture of his truck parked in my driveway, and I sent it to BJ. I said, just so you know, you bringing it up the other day reminded me I needed to get on this. So thank you for saying it. And he said, what's the name of the place? And I had to go look. It was a very nondescript name. It's like local plumbing. And I was like, it's nothing snazzy. And he said, I think that's the one we use. Now, what's interesting about it, BJ and Joe live an hour away from us, and this guy was an hour away from both of us. So it's not like it was a neighborhood guy. And so when he first got there, we walked out in the backyard, and he was showing me, he to his credit, he gave me more information about septic tanks than I ever wanted to know, but I know a lot now. I mean, and he was very patient with my questions. And I mentioned to him, I said, I've got some friends that just bought a house and they didn't even know they were on septic, so we kept talking. Well, later, I guess I called you or something, and he said, what is the guy's name? And I said, I think his name's Nick. He said, I'm telling you, that's the guy that we use. I said, what are the odds that we both picked? There was no reason why we both picked them. I said, I'm going to see that as a confirmation that I chose the right person. So we had to do some repairs. It was way more expensive than I had planned. And but it's fine because I thought, look, if this will save me some calamity in the future, after hearing everybody's horror stories, I'm like, no, what does it cost? I'll do it. Because we had to replace a pipe or something, and I felt like he was telling me the truth. I felt like it was a fair price. So when he came around for me to pay him, I said, you know what? We were talking about. I just started talking to him about walking in the Spirit. And he said, I kind of went through a similar thing with my truck recently, and he understood the spiritual side. I said the way I found you was, I just kind of go with what some people would call my gut. Yeah. And I said, and my friend that I mentioned to you earlier, I just talked to him, you're actually the ones that he used. He said, I knew that's who you were talking about. He totally remembered them. It was just kind of a very synchronicitous, I'm still not sure which is the proper word. But I'm saying it to you to say, just walk in the Spirit. And this whole week has been like that. Like even Ken was off Monday, it was Cinco de Mayo, and we were downtown, and we went to lunch, and we're walking back to the loft, and where my city house is a couple of blocks from the Ferris wheel, which we've ridden before, but it's like $20 to ride it, and I think if you're a senior, it's $17.50. And so we're walking by. He said, I want to ride the Ferris wheel. I said, what? Why? He said, because we're rich, we're going to ride it. It's like, okay, because I've been saying that. I've been saying, I'm having this with the things I've undertaken in the house. I have to say to myself, you're a rich man, you can handle this. When somebody tells you something is thousands of dollars, you know, don't let your knees buckle. It's like, it's just what it costs, and it's fine, and you've got it. And so I said, all right, fine. It's a beautiful day. Let's do it. We walked up, and so he was going to pay for it, and he said 2 seniors, and he said a guy just bought a senior ticket, and he didn't use it. So he gave us the ticket. Now, it's, again, kind of a small thing, but it's like lots of little green lights to say, you're in the flow, you're in the flow, you're in the flow. And Wednesday night of this week, it was just one of those days, and I may mention this in my teaching, but you know how when you've been, just for weeks, you've been on top of it, and you've been like great attitude, and just, you know, hitting all the green lights. And then there's one day, you kind of feel like you regressed a little bit. I don't know if anybody can relate. Y'all may be so evolved. But it's this one day you're like, I don't know why I'm having to work on my attitude today. And it kind of made me think about years ago when the Atkins diet first came out. One thing they said to do is give yourself a cheat day. Right. Like, you know, watch it, but there's one day a week. Just let yourself eat what you want to eat and you'll be fine. And it actually helps you psychologically. And I think there's a kind of a truth to that when you're just like, being positive against all odds, and there's one day you're like, I have a little cheat day. I might feel a little something. It was just one of those days, and you know, usually I eat with the boys on Wednesday night, and I don't know if your adult children are like this, but mine sometimes don't text back in a reasonable amount of time, and I don't want to nag them about it. I just want to make plans. All you have to do is say, can't do it tonight. Fine. But is that resonating with you? Like, I don't want to nag them. So, you know, Judah finally, I heard from him, and he said, well, I'm in Charleston this week. I said, okay, it's fine. Just tell me. So it's fine. And fortunately, I like myself enough that I can have dinner by myself, and I'm fine. But yesterday, Jonas sent me a picture of the baby, and I said, so I called him. I said, just a question. So why aren't you returning my text? He said, we're just sleep deprived. And I thought, you know what? You probably are, and it's fine. Oh, yeah, that's what he sent me. It was chilling. Well, you're on it, Michelle. Yeah, that's Raphael. And so anyway, it was all good. But I don't even think I was. It just was what it was. I wasn't even like feeling sorry for myself. I was just kind of in a mood. You know what I mean? It's like every other day this week's been just in the zone, and today's been kind of like, yeah. So I'm driving home, and I noticed these people, two men standing by a car. And one was dressed in a suit, and they were just standing by a car on the side of the road, and I didn't pay that much attention to it. Well, I get down about, I don't know, quarter of a mile, and there's another man in a totally black suit, white shirt, black tie, with a gas can running as hard as he can. And it's getting kind of a little bit dark, and this man's a very dark-skinned man wearing a black suit. And I'm like, you know, in about 20 minutes, you're going to be invisible on this road. So I pulled over, and I said, do you need help? And he said, yeah, there was a really sweet guy. He's from Ghana. And I said, well, get in the car. I'll take you to get your gas. And it took a minute. You know, let's just say he would have never made it if I hadn't picked him up. And I noticed he had a cross on his lapel. I said, are you trying to go to church tonight? He said, yeah, I'm preaching. And I said, what time's your service? He said, it's supposed to be 8 o'clock. I said, well, you ain't going to make it. It's like 5 minutes to 8. And he said, no, I'm just so appreciative that you stopped. And I said, no, it's fine. And I said, well, I'll wait for you to get the gas, and I'll take you back to where your car is. He said, no, you don't have to do that. I said, I'm telling you, you're 2 miles away from where your car is. So then he was like, no, I'll just get me there. I'll run across I said, no, you can't run across the expressway. You're going to have to climb over this thing. It's dangerous. It's fine. I've got plenty of time. I will bring you back. And so I waited for him to get his gas, and we got in the car. He said, why did you stop? He said, are you a Christian? I said, well, actually, I am a minister. And so we had I said, what church are you preaching at? He said, I'm preaching at a Spanish church. I said, are you using an interpreter? And he said, yeah, I've never used one. So I was giving him some tips about how to use an interpreter. It was just really, really good. So I finally got all the way, you know how you have to go to the next exit way down. And if I had been in a hurry, it would have been difficult, but I was happy to do it. And so when I finally got there, he was putting the gas in the car, and one of the men walked back, and he said, are you from the gas station? I said, no, I just saw him running with a gas can. He said, I can't thank you enough. And then he came back, he said, you're a minister? And I said, yeah. And don't ask me a lot more than that, but yeah. And he said, can I get your number so maybe we can do some ministry together? I said, okay. So but my point is, it completely turned my day around. Do you know what I mean? It was like I got outside of myself, and I wasn't in that, but it wasn't like I was about to jump off a cliff. It was just like, where's my mojo today? And just helping somebody, it was just a reminder to me that when you're feeling yourself too much, get outside of yourself and help somebody else. And I'm looking at these people and I'm thinking, you know, there's a church full of Hispanic people sitting somewhere waiting for these people to show up. So I saved the service. I may have saved the guy's life because I'm telling you, you could hardly see him in the dusk. And
there's a spiritual component to all of it.
Totally. And we connected immediately because when he got in the car, I said, are you Nigerian? He said, no, I'm from Ghana. And I said, well, so we were talking about, I was telling places I've been in Africa. It was just an immediate affinity. And they were all three of them came back and thanked me again. And because, you know, I mean, I don't know the world we live in, you know, you don't know. Is a white guy going to stop and help these people? I mean, you don't know. And I don't know. It was one of those little things that just had lots of components to it. And it's like Stella got her groove back. You know what I mean? It's like for the rest of the night, I was like, I just felt so good. And I just remembered their faces and how sweet they were. And you know, whether you realize it or not, you're always walking in the Spirit. Sometimes it's not as evident. But if you open up your spiritual eyes, even I was talking to Howie yesterday, he's walking I don't know how to say it right, it's this Camino de Santiago. And it's one of the three major Christian pilgrimages that people have been making since the medieval times. And this is like it's in Spain, and you end up at this cathedral where the bones of James are, and it's supposed to be this transformative situation. But he's, you know, I'm very connected to Howie, and I'm feeling him, and you know, he's walking incredible amounts of every day. And yesterday was the 9th day in a row of walking like 20, 30, 40 miles a day. And come in. So he was just telling me some of the, come in. He was telling me some of the synchronicity of his journey. And he said, you know, one thing I learned from you is the more you see it, the more you see it. I said, exactly. Like the more you open your eyes, you start seeing, like even if to me something is miracle adjacent, I'm going to take it. I'm going to put it in the miracle column. And even back to this guy that BJ and I somehow, I mean, to me, it was even a testament to how connected we are. I mean, when have you and I have ever talked about, you know what I mean? Like I've never, ever called you and said, hey, who would you recommend? You know, even the night you brought it up, I didn't ask you, by the way, who did y'all use? If anything, I was like, y'all stop talking, you're grossing me out, stop talking about it. But it was just, those are little things that are constant, they're continual teachable moments. Like you are in the flow, everything is supernatural, God's got you. Even when you're in things like taking care of things in the house that I'm like, man, I'm not that familiar with how to do this. But even just trusting your instincts and no, I'm making good decisions, and it's just good. I guess I'm saying all that to say it really is all good. And I bring those things up to tell you to notice it in your own life. And I love when people tell me, because it's not, if you think it's miraculous, it probably is. And, I always tell you the Einstein quote, 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And I'm in that second column. All right. Our outreach this month is the One EMS Unified, and we're happy to do that. They do great work. Remember, we have Meditation Weekend number 26 coming up on August 2nd and 3rd, which will also be our celebrating Metron's 11th anniversary. And we're going to St. Simon's, and a lot of people already booked. And St. Simon's is beautiful. I think this is the 6th or 7th time we've done one there. And they're always amazing. And so remember all of those things. Y'all ready for the word?
Yes.
Yeah. I like that, Sean. I bought that. When you said, yes, I believed you. We speak into this atmosphere and we say, let there be light. I'm in part 2 of a series, the title of which is, oh, that's cool. Michelle picks these out. That's why I'm surprised when I see them. Oh, that was cool. The Mind of Christ and Intention, Shaping Reality Through the Nexus of Science and Spirit. When I talk about science, I'm going to refer to quantum physics, but specifically neuroscience, because a lot of these guys like Joe Dispenza or Dr. Doty, who are neuroscientists, they're confirming things we've known by the Spirit for years. They're confirming with the way brain chemistry works and that sort of thing. And so I'm interested in that. Last week, I talked to you about the story in John chapter 5 of the man who was at the pool of Bethesda. I'm going to share the story again. I'm going to show it to you out of the NIV today, the New International Version. Last week we used the Message. This is John chapter 5, verse 1 through 9. It says, sometime later Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. And I showed you a picture of, I was there a few years ago. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat. We're used to saying, take up your bed and walk, but a better translation is bedroll or mat. Pick up your mat and walk. And once the man was cured, he picked up his mat and walked. 2 or 3 observations that I made last week, but for the point of context, let me make them again. When Jesus asked the man, do you want to be well? It's a simple question. The response should be yes. Not a trick question. It's not rocket science. And yet he goes into this clearly rehearsed story. There's no indication that an angel ever troubled the water. It was sort of like an urban legend and like an apparition site, and people believed it. And interestingly enough, with some of these apparition sites, there have been miracles, like Lourdes, and even back when Conyers was having its day when Mary supposedly showed up on the 13th, people actually things did happen. When people would ask me, do you think Mary's showing up? I'm like, you know what? These people are traveling from all over the world to hear what Mary has to say. Kudos to them. I know people that won't walk across the street to, hear from God. So, I'm neutral on it, and the main thing I brought up last week, and this to me is transformational. I've taught on this for years, and I gave credit where credit is due. Mr. Alexander, who spoke at Bishop Troy's funeral Friday night, was a week ago. He mentioned this, and it just resonated with me so much, and now I'm taking it to the next level and teaching it. I'd never thought of this before, but when Jesus said, "Take up your bed and walk," the bedroll, the mat, was a symbol of the man's sickness that he'd had for 38 years. And his point at the funeral the other day was Jesus didn't say abandon the mat. He didn't say leave the mat there. He didn't say burn it. He said take it up and walk with it, which is kind of, is oxymoron the right word when two things mean, like they mean the opposite? Yes. Like taking up your bed and walking is counterintuitive, because if you still have the bed, that means you're still an invalid, and yet he's cured and he's walking. And so my point last week, and I felt like you all got it. My point was, in evangelical or Pentecostal or charismatic theology, we were so results oriented. Like, if any man's in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away. Right. Forget those things which are behind. I built a whole spiritual empire on the concept of now, and still use it. My email is still Bish in the Now. Our website for Metron is bishinthenow.com. So I believe in the concept of living in the now. Living in the now, however, does not mean that the past doesn't exist. And that's why I think this is possibly the most mature thing I've ever taught, because, years ago I was in Los Angeles, and I don't know if any of you know of the woman. Her name was Amy Semple McPherson, and she's the one that started the Foursquare gospel denomination, and she was quite a character. She had this is a woman preacher back in the 20s who built this. It's still an incredible cathedral there in Los Angeles, right close to Azusa Street. And she's a twice divorced woman preacher that filled that cathedral up 5 times every Sunday, and it seated 5,000 people. She had a radio program. She was incredible, and she also had scandal in her life. They've made movies about her, and she's a very controversial figure. But years ago, I was there. They've actually, another ministry owns it now, and they've reopened it. But I being a history buff like I am, I told the person I was with, I said, I want to go by Angela's temple and see if I can see inside it, because I've never been there. It was not open, and there was a secretary who was working there, and I said, I'm from Atlanta, and I've read a lot about Sister McPherson. I would really love to be able to see inside there. And she said, well, it's not open, but I'll give you a tour. So I said, okay, I really appreciate it, which means she had to turn on lights and everything. We got to this one place in this hallway, and I mean, you cannot believe the expanse of crutches and stretchers and leg braces and just all these, because McPherson was very much in that healing revival, when you'd see those tent preachers, break somebody's cane and say, you'll never use this again. And that is a reality. Am I hearing music? Is that just me? That's okay. Laverne's being a DJ. I'm still hearing it. Okay. All good. Laverne, I just want to make sure I wasn't crazy. I was like, y'all are hearing that, right? It's all good. So I mean, I could tell you, I saw amazing stories. My dad brought Catherine Kuhlman to Atlanta twice. And I saw amazing things when I was a kid. But I also saw lots of people leave in wheelchairs. And, that was, we so concentrated on what we call the success stories that we didn't want to talk about the ones that left the same way they came in. And, there's some people that say, because, I've got a son who's been in recovery for years, and you know all about his journey. I know people that say, I was an alcoholic for years, and I went to an altar and prayed, and Jesus delivered me, and I never drank again. Great. That's awesome for you. That has not been everybody's experience. Right. I don't want to take that away from you if that was yours. If you say, I went down to an altar and I asked Jesus to come into my heart and I was never depressed again. That's awesome. Good for you. I don't want to diminish that in any way, but can I tell you, I've spent a huge part of my life counseling with depressed Christians. So just to say, come to Jesus and you'll never be sick again. You'll never be sad again. It's just not true. Why is it true for some people? I don't know. Who knows? I just know that has not been everybody's experience, which is why when he says, take up your bed and walk, I'm not ready to let go of this story yet. Because it's a key. Now, he does say that the man was cured. Now, I want to show you, this is interesting. I didn't share this with you last week. When we read on down, this is verse 9 through 15, also in the NIV. It says, the day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, it is the Sabbath, the law forbids you to carry your mat. Now, let me stop right here. That right there, that's the very definition of religion. This man's been an invalid for 38 years. He lives in a small community. Clearly, people knew that he was paralyzed. Wouldn't you think you saw somebody that you had seen lie on a mat for nearly 4 decades? You see him walk in the temple. Wouldn't you think your response would be like, oh my God, what happened? Religious people, Jesus said, you strain at gnats and you swallow camels. In other words, you obsess over minutia and don't notice the man's, are you kidding me with this? He hasn't walked in 38 years. He just walked into the temple and all you can say is, you're not doing it right. And even the fact that he says, the law forbids you to carry your mat, to me it's like charismatic law forbade us to carry our mats. We wanted, come to the healing line, let me pray for you, you're going to fall out of the power, and when you stand up, you're done. Next, it was like an assembly line. So if somebody said, yeah, but I still have the pain, you're like, we don't want to hear that. We want to believe in the God who delivers and delivers right now, and you never have to deal with it again. Does anybody feel me on this? So this is a very loaded statement. And I even Googled it. Like, why was it unlawful to carry your mat? It's because they considered it work. And people worshipped the Sabbath so much that all they could focus on is keeping that day holy. And, you've all heard the story about, it's a very old anecdote about the woman that's baking the ham and she cuts it in half. And her husband says, why do you cut the ham in half to bake it? She said, I don't know, my mother always did. And so they asked the mother, why do you cut the ham in half? She said, I don't know, my mother always did, and that's how she told me to do it. They asked the grandmother, she said, I never had a pan big enough for the entire ham. So there's a classic example of something that was practical in the beginning that doesn't make sense now. I've shared this with you before, but back in, since I mentioned falling out under the power, some of you all remember those days. And I'm not trivializing it. It's happened to me when it was really real. I've also seen a lot of power suggestion. I don't even think Ken knows what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about when I say falling under the power? You've seen that, like when you pray for someone, they fall. Okay. He was raised Methodist. They didn't do a lot of falling. But years ago, I remember, like back in the day, if the power hit a woman and she fell out, in the Pentecostal church, there'd be a man standing by who'd take his jacket off and throw it over her for modesty's sake. Because sometimes if a woman fell, God forbid, you saw her knees. Because, every man in that room's going to lust if we see her knees. So, well, then the charismatic movement sort of was a little more uptown than that. So we actually had modesty clause. We had them at Church in the Now. That's what all the big charismatic churches did. On the front row, there'd be a stack of cloths under there, and then you'd have altar workers who would wait. And if somebody fell out, you would drape them. But there'd be no reason to drape men unless a man came to church in a mini skirt. I don't think it's a whole other issue. So I was at a service one night somewhere, and this prophetess was preaching, and I came down, and they gave me a word, and it felt legit to me. And I'm not saying I would fake it, but I didn't resist it either, because I'm rarely in a place where somebody's ministering to me, and I was into it that night. So, there's a catcher behind me, so I'm like, here I go. So I'm out, and it was a nice experience. But then suddenly I had the sensation that I was being covered up, and not only covered up but tucked in. Like I opened my eyes, and there was a young girl who had covered me up and was very, very politely tucking me in all the way down. So I'm laying there like I'm tucked in for the night. And I looked at her and I thought, I don't think you understand, since I did not wear a skirt tonight, I don't think you understand what this is about. Of course, I'm not going to embarrass her, but she's so sincere. You could tell she took it very seriously. She's very lovingly tucking me in. And I'm like, I think somebody didn't explain to her. You don't have to people who are covered don't need to be covered. But it's a classic example of some rule that doesn't make any sense. And Jesus just busted right through that. You remember when the disciples were coming back, they were walking through a field, and they take they eat the grains off the stalk. Well, the Pharisees were clutching them pearls, like, you're not supposed to do that. And Jesus not only defended them, he said, look, you weren't supposed to eat the showbread in the temple. But when David's men came back from hunting, they were hungry and they ate it. And he says, man wasn't made for the Sabbath was made for man. And I could just as easily say, man wasn't made for the Bible was made for man. Meaning, when I was in Bible college, they always taught me if the text says one thing and your heart says something different, ignore your heart and go with the text. Now I feel just the opposite. Now if I read something in the text and my heart doesn't jibe with it, I think, well, that can't be right. Yeah. And some people say, is that dangerous? You know what I think is more dangerous? Legalism. Yeah. Paul said the letter kills. He didn't say liberty kills. The letter does. And so, Jesus, this is amazing. And then he goes on to say, but he replied, the man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. Again, that's a juxtaposition, an oxymoron. If you picked up your bed, how are you well? How can those two things be true? I mean, to be able to understand the gospel, you've got to be able to think outside the box. Wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That's no two animals are less alike. I mean, we use a serpent to talk about Satan and a dove to talk about the Holy Spirit, and Jesus says, be like both of them. That's crazy talk, Jesus. You understand why the Pharisees, who had built their entire worldview on the law, just wanted to kill him because he was so dismissive of it. You've heard it said, but I say. Like, well, who do you think you are? Can I rock your world? You have the right to say too. If somebody says, yeah, but the Bible says this. Yeah, I've heard that said, but I say. Bishop, only Jesus could do that. Look, Jesus said you're supposed to do greater works. I don't think she'll mind me saying this, but the other day I was talking about when Howie landed in Spain. I'm going to get back to this in a minute. When he landed in Spain, he's planned this thing for a year. And he gets there, and Spain, the electricity goes out all over Spain and Portugal. Biggest blackout Europe's ever had. So I remembered it as if I said, I tell the lights to come back on in Spain. And they did. A few minutes later, of course, Howie completely credited me with that. Well, when I said something about it, Denise, who I'm sure she's probably not watching now, she watches it later, who lives down in Cochrane, she said, you used the word command, and it really resonated with me because I don't use that word a lot now, because back in the charismatic days, it was, I command you in Jesus' name. And I didn't remember saying command. And so she sent me a little clip. She says, here's where you said it. And I said, I stand corrected. She says, no, I'm not correcting you. I would never do that. I'm saying there was some really power when you said that. And she said, Bishop, when you commanded the lights to come back on in Spain, they obeyed you. And she said, that's your divinity. She said, Jesus said you were supposed to do greater works. And then she said something, Denise, if you're watching this, I've thought about it every day since she wrote this. She said, I don't want to ever think that Jesus regrets giving us the keys of the kingdom. Because if I give you the keys to my car, if you say, I'm saying, here's my car. There's no higher compliment than being trusted. If I give you the key, if I'm out of town, I give you the keys to my house. I don't micromanage you. I'm like, well, I've given you authority. And look, again, I give this disclaimer every time. I know there's people who have abused this. I'm aware of that. I was even thinking of this week, and for anybody that came from the Unification Church, I hope I'm not disclosing something that you're not supposed to disclose, but I want to say this to you. I had a little period of time where I worked with the Global Peace Festival, which was the son of Reverend Sun Myung Moon that started the Unification Church. And it was a very cool time in my life. But I told them from the outset, I said, look, I'm willing to work with you guys because I love the ecumenical thing that you do. I said, I just need you to know, I'm never going to believe that Reverend Moon is who y'all think he is. So if you think I'm coming into this to become a convert, that's never going to happen. Full disclosure, you just need to know. And they never violated it, but then one time we did go to South Korea, and Debbie was with me, and we had breakfast. It wasn't just us and Reverend Moon, who's going on now, but it was faith leaders from all over. You know, when I tell you the story about the Japanese monks that bowed to my cross, they were at that table that day. And there's this early morning service they would have. It was called Hundake, and they invited us to it. And so I went, and I was very impressed with Moon. I mean, he was in his 90s, and he was still very vital man. But at a certain point, everybody in the room, I hope I'm not, they bowed down in front of him, like doing worship. And I just didn't. You know those stories of those pictures where you see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing up, and I'm like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I can't I can't do this. I respect that y'all are doing it. I can't do that. And we had a little bit of, it kind of changed the dynamic of our relationship. But in talking to one, and then when I came out, that really changed the dynamic because their whole thing was based on Adam and Eve and the perfect family and everything. And so I'm still Facebook friends with many of them. They're maybe watching right now, and I hope I have not spoken out of turn. I'm just telling you that's what happened. They were always super nice to me, and even when they kind of connected with Minister Farrakhan, they flew me to Chicago because they knew that I knew him and wanted him to feel at home. So, I mean, a lot of really cool things in my life happened. I have no regrets for that. But I was telling someone later, I said, let me explain to you what I think. Reverend Moon says that in 1934, Jesus appeared to him on a mountain in Korea and said, I want you to finish my work. I said, I don't disagree with that. Because I think Jesus says that to everybody. I said, I would go so far as to say Reverend Moon may be the only kingdom man who ever really lived and manifested this. Because he did turn it into something kind of amazing. I mean, they own UPI. I mean, nearly all the sushi in the world they own. They own nearly all. I mean, it's incredible what they accomplished. So I said, I'm not going to bow and worship him. But if he says Jesus appeared to him, I'm like, it sounds to me like he did. Now, I'm not about to start a worldwide, like, you've known me for many years. I like attention, but I've never asked y'all to bow down. If I tell you I commanded lights to come back on, they came back on, you can think that was a coincidence. Maybe it was. But I'm telling you that because I want you to embrace the power of commanding a thing. And when Denise wrote that to me, she says, no, don't misunderstand me. I'm not correcting you. I'm saying you gave that word back to me, and I want you to recognize it. I went and looked at it, and I thought, well, I did say that. He said, what's the difference? Well, command's kind of think about it. Ladies, if your husband says, would you please make me a ham sandwich? You might do that. If he says, I command you to make me a ham, you'd be like, I'm about to command something. You know what I mean? So command is another kind of little bit shade of meaning, and yet Jesus said, I want you to do stuff I never thought of. I want you to do stuff I haven't done. I mean, did he say it or didn't he say it? And to do that, you got to take some risks. And so he says, the man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. So they ask him, who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk? In other words, this doesn't make sense. If you have a mat, that means you're an invalid. No, Jesus healed me. Then why are you still carrying the mat? That's the question. And this is where it brings the rest of humanity in. Because for people who haven't had the manifestation, and now I'm not just talking about physical manifestation. For people who still it hasn't kicked in for them like it seemed to with other people, it's okay. This story gives you hope. You can take up your mat and you can walk at the same time. Let me ask you this, those of you on this Mother's Day, for those of you whose mothers have already crossed to the other side, and it's many of you, on the way here, Ken said, I forgot, I didn't put flowers on my mother's grave. I said, do you want to drive out there? He said, no, I just wish I'd thought of it. That's something I don't have to think of yet. But especially if your mother suffered at the end, didn't you, and when she finally was no longer suffering, didn't you feel two things at once? You were sad and relieved. You were crying and you were joyful. How could you feel two things? Did you say, no, I wanted to come back no matter what? No, you didn't. Not if she was not in that way. If she was suffering, if she wasn't herself. I mean, Ken's mother had Alzheimer's. She didn't know who he was at the end. I went through that with my dad. It's one of the worst things that ever happens to you when a parent looks at you and you can tell it is not registering who they are. Everything in you thinks they'll recognize me. So, no, they don't. Can I say, not going to be a big surprise, those of you who had to sit through me venting about this for years, I still have PTSD dealing with my dad. But I live in the house. I wore his jacket all day yesterday. And it didn't oppress me. How can those two things be true? Because I took up my bed and I walked. I'm healed of the pain of it, but I also don't want you to tell me it didn't happen. And carrying the mat says, no, I've been through some stuff. And I'm going to keep, I'm not laying on the mat. I'm not by the pool of Bethesda. Because look, he's in the temple. And look what Jesus says to him. The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, see, you are well again. And then Jesus only said this twice in the Gospels. The other one was to the woman caught in adultery. He says, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Now, what's he talking about? This man's been an invalid for 38 years. I mean, how much sinning was he doing? It wasn't sex sin. He wasn't smoking and drinking and gambling and all that. So what's the sin? The sin is not recognizing that you're healed. He said, don't go back to that story again. Because he says, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. So the sin is carrying your mat thinking you're damned to be on that mat. The victory is, yeah, I'm carrying it, but look at me, I'm walking with it. I took up my bed and I walked. You don't tell invalids to walk. We were listening to, I've got something on my playlist. It's famous hymns. I actually do like these, the way these are done. And I was listening to Oh, for a Thousand Tongues to Sing. I was telling Ken, I said, you know, the Wesley brothers wrote this, who started the Methodist Church. But that last line says, here, something about hear him, you deaf, you blind, behold your Savior come, and leap ye lame for joy. It's nearly like a cruelty joke. Like, what do you mean? You're telling me to see something, I'm blind. You're telling me to hear something, I'm deaf. You're telling me to leap for joy. Exactly. You can live out all of your days healed. The man he wasn't in the pool of Bethesda. And I'll tell you something else. I think part of Jesus saying to him, don't sin unless a worse thing happens to you, misery loves company. So he's basically saying, you're still carrying your mat, but you're through the looking glass. Once that butterfly, look, when the caterpillar becomes a butterfly, it's kind of a death in a sense, because the other caterpillars don't know what to do with the butterfly. You're totally different now. You can't go back and hang with them. So you may still be carrying your mat, but there's some conversations you can't have anymore. Because those people still laying by the pool, they haven't experienced what you're experiencing. The concept of walking with a mat seems unthinkable to them. You hear what I'm saying? So the greater sin is not really realizing how far you've come. Kudos to the people who have allowed me to vent over the years and purge myself of a lot of issues with both of my parents. I also hold myself accountable now. It's like, there's no point. What's the point of saying those things now? because I've made my point. Like now it's just going to oppress me and bring me down. And you know, Dr. Dispenza says when you retell a painful experience, your body doesn't realize it's not happening right now. So you go through all the trauma response. Let me move on. I've used this verse before. It just blows me away, especially in the Amplified Classic. It's Ecclesiastes 3:15. That which is now already has been, and that which is to be already has been. And God seeks that which has passed by so that history repeats itself. What? See, we've been told, no, you get in the now. You're in the now. Don't think about it again. How realistic is that? You ever been so done with a relationship, you're like, thank God I'm free of that. And then you're somewhere and some song comes on the radio and you're like, that was my song. And suddenly it's 1974. And it doesn't make sense, but you just time traveled right back there. You're like, what the heck is this? What is this I'm feeling? And you can start feeling some kind of way. If you don't check that, you'll start thinking, I should have never let them go. Then you get with them about 5 minutes later. Oh, now I remember. Now there it is. Now it all came back to me. But too many relationships have ended badly because somebody didn't know how to take up their bed and walk. How to take up their bed and walk away. I mean, you can let yourself have a little minute. You go, yeah, we had some good times, but you better end it right there. If you pick up that phone, I know there was somebody else. I just want to hear the voice. Don't do it, because you're gonna go back to Bethesda, and a worse thing is going to come on you. Now, 38 years is going to be 72 years. You know, even Jesus, and I think of this more now metaphorically, but even when Jesus says an unclean spirit goes out of a man and he wanders through dry places and he doesn't have any place to go, so he comes back and brings 7 more with him, and the latter part of that man is worse than the first part. Even something, it's funny, I mentioned Amy Semple McPherson, now I'm going to mention Oral Roberts, who was also another. Oral Roberts was flawed. You know, he had a gay son that committed suicide who is buried next to him. And his son killed himself mainly because of the stuff that Oral Roberts said about gay people. And it was, that being said, the guy was amazing. I mean, some of you won't remember this, but I mean, back in the 50s, he was like casting out demons and healing people on network TV, on prime time television, NBC. He came out of the sticks of Oklahoma and built this incredible university. I mean, the guy was an incredible figure, and I was able to meet him a couple times. But I remember him saying the way he doing ministry, he had tuberculosis when he was a teenager, and he was coughing up his lungs. But he went to this is back during the healing revivals, the tent meetings and stuff, and he got healed, and he was playing basketball, and one day he started coughing up blood again, and he panicked because he said, oh my God, I've told all these people I'm healed and I'm not healed. And he went and talked to his grandmother, was I don't remember whatever the Indians, the Native Americans from Oklahoma area. She was had been a squaw, and she said to him, she said, baby, if you feel bad, go lay down, but don't take your clothes off and put your pajamas on. Lay on top of the covers. And what she was saying is, she wasn't saying don't ever go to sleep again. She was just saying don't become an invalid again. Like if you feel it, go lay down, but don't, like there's the official putting on of the pajamas when you're like, I'm going back to the bed. Because she was saying if you do that, you'll die. And it's just such a powerful principle. It's simple, but it's very powerful. Because sometimes you could think, oh, I'm doing so good, I'm totally over something, and then you'll have a little bit of a setback. You can't overreact to that setback. You hear me? Just because the doctor didn't give you the glowing report that you wanted, don't catastrophize it and make it more than it was. Or more than it is. Because history is repeating itself. And that's okay. Do you know why it's okay? I'm at a place now where something happened that reminds me of something negative, and I can think, I'm okay with that. When I posted this thing last night, I fully meant it. Because I posted a picture of my mom. I posted a picture of me with Jared and Christina's mom, which she and I went through a lot in our lives. And we're not close in any way. She's been remarried for years. I posted a picture with Debbie and the boys. I posted a picture of Christina with her girls and Sophie that you saw with the new baby. And I said, I want to honor all the mothers who are part of my... Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was just the other day. I love that picture. I said, I want to honor all the mothers of my journey and sincerely... That was last year on Mother's Day. And sincerely... yeah, some of our history, and since there's Jared and Christina's mom, and I sincerely meant it. I thought I'd speak a blessing on all of them. They might not speak a blessing on me.
You gotta do the right thing. That's right.
But I thought I can honestly say this now. And there's no, I've taken up my bed and I've walked. And I'm not saying I was victimized. I'm just saying, look, anybody who's ever been through a divorce, it wasn't just them. Mm-hmm. Bishop, I was going with you till you said that. But it was. Huh?
It takes two to untangle.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter. But they cheated them. It doesn't. You're missing the point. Mm-hmm. You have to look back. Remember when I taught that about God looking back over the 6 days of creation and saying it's good. Everything that you created in your life, including the misfires and the mistakes, you have to look back on all of it and say it's good. And that means that sometimes history is going to repeat itself. You can't pretend like history didn't happen. I mean, you've had history with somebody. Kid said that Lisa, his ex-wife, texted this week, said, are we supposed to give, because Brandon and his wife are expecting a baby, are we supposed to give them a shower? He said, I don't know. Well, like, that's his journey. But I can't go, what? Oh, yeah, they just had this, that's week. His name's Henry. That's him in the womb. And that's Brandon and Kenley. Brandon's he's real sweet like Ken. You would love him. But you can't pretend like you didn't have a life with somebody. And if you're afraid of history repeating itself, you're wasting your time, because history... William Faulkner's famous line was, you can't forget the past, it's not even the past. And we were taught, sea of forgetfulness, he's removed my transgressions from me as far as the east is from the west. That doesn't mean that God has amnesia. God could remember. If God's omniscient, God could remember everything. He chooses to see you a certain way. Let me move on. This is a meditation I wrote. Michelle, I may skip this one because I'm not sure this is relevant to where I'm going with this. Go on to the next thing, please. This is this Dr. Doty that I mentioned last week, which it was cool. Last week, Mayshawn was here, and he just graduated yesterday. He just got his master's in psychology from Pepperdine, and he said, everything that you taught last week is stuff that I just talked about, did my thesis on. I quoted this guy, and it was a real synchronous moment. But he says this, and I love this. He says, I felt that connection with others throughout my life. Sometimes it's a random person in an elevator where you look into each other's eyes, and for reasons you can't explain, there is a connection. Not just simply eyes meeting, but some deeper knowing, an acknowledgement of each other's humanity and the reality of being on the same path. And when that happens, it's pretty magical. Other times I've looked into the eyes of someone who is homeless or just down and out. And when our eyes connect, it is as if I could see my very own face staring back at me. And for that brief moment, and often even longer, I experience the pain of my own journey and feel deep empathy, followed by gratitude that my journey has taken me to where I am today. Everyone has a story. And I have learned that at the core of it, most of our stories are more similar than not. Connection can be powerful. Sometimes just a brief meeting can change someone's life forever. What's that got to do with history and taking up your mat? You have to carry your story with you because somebody else needs your story. That's why everybody's needed. I mean, I've fathered children, but I've never been in labor. There's things that a woman who's had children can say to a woman who's about to go through it. I can't say it because I haven't experienced that. The best part of that little moment the other day when I picked up the minister from Ghana is when we were talking about ministry. Because he had a very thick accent, and I'm thinking, I hope you got a good interpreter. And he asked me, he said, what's it like? I said, if you find a good one, I said, let's believe you'll have a good one tonight. You nearly become the same person. It's like you get into a zone where you're thinking something and it's coming out of their mouth in that language. I said, let's believe. And the last thing I said to them before they drove off, I said, I believe you're going to have a great service tonight and everything's going to be a great flow. But the connection I had, I'm white, he's black, I'm American, he's African, but I've been out of gas before. And I know what it's like to have a room full of people waiting for you to minister. And you know, I thought of all those things. I thought, bless his heart, he's probably sweated down running in this suit. Now he's got to, you know, because I would think about that. If I had to go in and minister, I'm like, oh man, I hope I don't smell bad. I mean, those are the things. But we had this very common moment. That's why I tell you, especially when you travel a lot, especially if you do international travel, the first thing you notice is how different everybody is, but the more that arc moves, you start realizing how similar everybody is. And people they've had similar experiences. And that's why, you know, when I am downtown at my city house, there's homeless people everywhere, and they're coming up to my car window, and it's like, it's a lot. And sometimes you're walking and you see in your peripheral vision, you see somebody approaching, you're like, oh, do I have to go through this? And after we rode the Ferris wheel, I forgot about this, Monday, we get off the Ferris wheel and we're walking by Waffle House, and this guy comes up with this whole story about how he hadn't had anything to eat. And what am I going to say? Because he said, I'm hungry. I'm like, well, you said the magic words. I said, come in and order what you want. He said, can I order something for this guy? And I said, yeah, fine. So we stood there. Then he disappeared after I paid for it. And where'd he go? And I see him walking up with the other guy. And I'm like, her name's Tamika. She's in there. She's got your food. It's already paid for. That was a very human moment. Because who knows what his previous life was like. You can't be too judgmental. You know, when Jesus said, and I'm trying to come to a close of this, but you know, when Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me not, when he says those who didn't minister, you didn't visit me in prison, they go into the fire. He wasn't talking about hell. You know what he's talking about? He says, the same thing's going to happen to you. and it's going to burn out. Because nothing will make you less judgmental about people's marriages who break up than going through a couple of your own divorces. When somebody wants to have something to say about it, you're like, I don't think I got anything to say. Because now you understand how stuff can happen. That's why even when I mention Amy Semple McPherson or Oral Roberts, I can tell you about their flaws and still say they were incredibly anointed. Those are not mutually exclusive. Amy Semple McPherson liked men. And she was full of the Holy Ghost. How does that happen? You know good and well how it happens because you're human too. Mm-hmm. All right, two things I want to leave you with. Einstein, I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but he had his theory. He believed that time was an illusion, that everything, past, present, and future, was all happening simultaneously. There's a whole, it's called block theory. There's a whole thing about it. And even when he did the E equals MC squared, he was trying to explain the relativity of time. And there's something true about that. Like, if you meet somebody who you haven't seen in 40 years, you have to become, to be able to talk to them, you have to become who you were when you knew them 40 years ago. Because they don't know who you are now. I remember when I went to my 10-year college reunion, Jared looked, I was never as lean as him, but we looked nearly identical. And I was showing my classmates from college, I was showing them pictures of my kids, and I remember them saying, a picture of Jared, they said, "That's Jimmy Swilley. We don't know who you are. We don't know who this middle-aged guy is, but that's the guy we went to school with." And it's because you're everybody you've ever been. And you say, "I'm not that person anymore." Yes, you are. Well, how do I deal with the bad stuff? You take up your bed and walk. You walk through it. You don't stay at Bethesda. But this is what Einstein said. Time is not at all what it seems. It does not flow in only one direction, and the future exists simultaneously with the past. That doesn't make me feel bad. That comforts me in a way. Because I can look back at my past and I can change the narrative on all of it. Walking means I can tell you the story, and I'm not punching it up. I'm just telling it differently than I told it before. I can have compassion on people. I can have compassion on my parents because I think, well, I understand their journey. And I can empathize with it because I've had drama with my children. And then this Nathaniel Brandon says this. Sometimes the subconscious mind manifests a wisdom several steps or even years ahead of the conscious mind and has its own way of leading us toward our destiny. This is my favorite thing that I've said today, right there, using that quote, because I know in my own life things have happened to me that who I was manifested as at that point did not understand it. Yeah. You know, like when I've told you the story a million times about when I was in Nigeria and the Muslim man came and said, "I'm going to pray with you." Yeah. And he didn't bow towards Mecca. He paced with me the same way I was praying. And the whole time, my training was, this is an opportunity for you to lead him to Jesus. But something in my spirit said, you don't understand this yet. You will understand this later. Just pray with him. He wants to pray with you. Just pray with him. And I did. And the whole time, I'm walking back and forth on the roof of that hotel, and he's praying with me. I don't know what language he was praying in. I was praying in the Spirit. The whole time I kept thinking, am I doing this wrong? I think I'm supposed to lead him to Jesus. And who I am now is like, don't blow this moment. I'm showing you something about the universal God that years down the road you will understand. You don't understand it right now. Even, I need y'all to be in agreement. You know, my teacher friend, you know, I just need you to be in agreement. I need her to survive this heart issue. I need her to live. But back in the day, I always loved her so much, but I was always trying to get her saved. Like if I went to the house, I was always thinking, how can I bring the conversation? You know, it was so obnoxious. You can't have a conversation with somebody because you're like, hi, how you doing? Hi, heaven is high. Let me tell you how to get to heaven. You know, just like, oh God, I can't believe people went and slapped me. Fast forward all these years later, when I talked to her the other day, I said, I'm sorry I'm calling you. It's been on my mind. She said, well, I had another heart attack. And I said, I knew I should have called you. And I said, let me just tell you this. I said, the story of David and Goliath, with whether it was literal or not, I talked, the thing you've heard me say a million times. I said, before he faced Goliath, he said, I killed a bear and I killed a lion. You've already been through some stuff. You know how to do this. And she said, oh, that's awesome. And she said, there must have been a reason you were put in my class all those years ago. I don't need to get her saved. My spirit was speaking to her spirit, and she was getting it.
And for you to reunite.
Totally. But have you ever had flashes like that where something from you, it's like the you of the future visited you and said, you're not ready for this right now? But at some point you will be. Why? Because past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. How do we deal with it? We take up our bed and walk. We walk through our futures. We walk to our destiny. Yeah, but how can I do it carrying the past with me? Well, you got to get out of that Sabbath mentality and just live in the now.
One question. I keep thinking about the man who didn't know initially how he got healed. Jesus spoke to him, stop sinning, stop missing the mark, and then he went back and told it was Jesus. It was the word of his testimony. I mean, that's a difference there. He didn't know at first, and then when Jesus spoke to him.
I think that was for the, if you didn't hear what Larry's question was, he was saying, after he realized it was Jesus, why did he go back and tell them? Because they wanted to know. You know, it happened twice. The blind guy, remember that they brought him in, and he said, I don't know if he's good or bad. I just know he can heal me. This guy said, by the way, I found out it is Jesus. So I think that was just, in my mind, that was just him rocking the Pharisees' world, saying, you guys need to recognize who this guy is. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with telling people about Jesus. I love Jesus. I just don't think people who haven't heard of him I just don't think God wants to send people to hell. What about the lost? Well, there's lost people everywhere. The prodigal son was always a son. He never lost his sonship. He was just lost. So when people say, do you believe in winning the lost? Heck yeah. There's lost people. I pass them every day. But that doesn't mean it's always going to end in a sinner's prayer and them saying the name of Jesus. You gotta know how to tap into the spirit. The spirit world is much higher than the mental world. And there's things you know by the Spirit. Even, let me tell you this one more time. When I lived in Covington, our next door neighbor was a gay couple who had been together for years. When his name was Terry, I was with him the night before he died. And this is before I would have ever considered coming out myself. I never discussed it with them. I was just like, I was nearly afraid to be around them. And, but I'm sitting there by his bed, and I said, Terry, is there anything, because this was teaching me. I said, is there anything you need to say or get right or whatever? And he looked and he said, no, I can't think of anything. I said, you feel like you're ready to see God? He said, yeah. And even me, part of my upbringing was, why don't you renounce being homosexual? But my future me was like, he said he's fine. You don't need to bring that up. So he said, well, what's heaven like? And I said, well, Paul said he saw something but he wasn't allowed to talk about it. John, I told him, I said, this is streets of gold. I said, I think that's symbolic, but a lot of people think that's literal. And he said, well, it sounds beautiful. And he said, well, what do you, when you're with people before they die, what do you do? I said, well, a lot of times people they pray a sinner's prayer. I said, would you like to do that? He said, sure. So I led him in a prayer, and he prayed Romans 10, 9, and 10. It didn't make any difference in the conversation. It was like irrelevant. But he prayed it. When I did his funeral, I said that, and boy, everybody was, oh, they were just so happy. He prayed that prayer. I'm like, I think y'all are missing, I think you're straining at gnats. Because I lived next door to him, and the first time I ever saw him, we lived on Floyd Street there in Covington, and somebody was riding a horse down, and the horse just crapped all over my front sidewalk, and the guy just kept riding. And I'm looking out the window like, I cannot believe you did this. In a minute, I see little Terry. He had really bad arthritis, his little gnarled hands. He didn't even know me. He came out, shoveled all the horse shit up, without even telling me he did it. Did you pray a sinner's prayer? I didn't need to pray a sinner's prayer. He was already right with God. What he did is what Jesus would do. And that was one of those situations where future me was saying, you don't understand this yet, but one day you will get this, which is why now, like I told you, Judah asked me the other day, he said, what would you do if somebody asked you to pray for them to be baptized in the Holy Spirit? I said, I would pray for them to be baptized. I mean, if that's what they believe is the thing, I would meet them at their point of faith. When this guy from Ghana said, give me your number, we'll do some ministry things together, part of me wanted to say, if you knew everything about me, you might not feel that way, but I don't know. I said, yeah, here's my number. Who knows? He might be here next week. But old me might not have been ready for that. So it makes me think, well, who am I in the future?
A better version.
Still walking. Let's all stand. If I'm going to do a quick prayer over the mothers. If you want to come down, we're going to stand right here. This will be you can leave from here. So if you want to bring your purse with you so you don't have to go back up, climb the stadium stairs back up. Take up your purse and walk. Just fill up this little area right in here. Did you get anything out of this today? And we won't do the outro, Michelle. Just if you have a check, make it to JESM. If you have cash, just pay it forward. I speak a blessing over each of these women who have been part of the mothering, birthing process. Mothers, grandmothers, stepmothers, mothers-in-law, mother figures, women who have been mentors. And I speak life and gratitude and peace and grace wherever they are in the journey. For new mothers today, I thank you, Spirit of God, that you give them strength to do what they need to do. Mothers of adult children, that they know how to find that place of balance now, being there for their children, for grandmothers, for great women of stature. We speak a blessing. And not their children, we all rise up and call them blessed. And those of you at home who are listening to this, you're blessed when you come in. You're blessed when you go out. I bless the fruit of your womb. I bless your children. I bless your stepchildren. I bless your adopted children. I bless the children you birthed. I bless your great-grandchildren. I bless generations that will be here on the earth long after you're no longer here in the material world. I say that your heritage is blessed. And those of you watching at home, mothers, I bless you as well. And everyone said, Amen. Amen. God bless you. Go in peace.
Thank you.
We're going to go a little deeper next week.
Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Love you.
Love you.